Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Legion 99 podcast, your source for the latest tactics, news, battle reports, hobby talk, and general Legion chatter. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Legion 99. I'm Nick, and I am here with Mike Syrylo. And guess what? He's back.
I am.
He's back. We got him back. Not really. It wasn't that much work. He basically asked me. I didn't ask him. So, but I was like, true. Yeah, I guess we'll take you back. It's good timing. No, welcome back, Mike, as permanently back to the cast. Or, very excited to have you back. Everybody at Fifth Trooper was very excited when we were able to work that out.
Yeah, so. I'm not really sure how I got roped back into TFT, but somehow I'm back there.
Yeah.
It's been 3-4 years.
Belong here with me. With me here. Always in my heart. Obviously.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, you bring a lot to the show. So and with Keegan stepping back for a little while, it kind of was perfect timing.
That was convenient.
Yeah. I'm sure Keegan will be back, but for now, it was like I was just gonna be I'm gonna throw out my fishing line in the Fifth Trooper pool and see who wants to cast with me each episode. That was basically what was going to happen. And that's great.
Technically now that's accurate still.
Right. Yeah. And it's since we joined, that's one of the great things since we joined the network, being able to pull from such illustrious, great cast of people in the community. Like Evan Paul's been on a few times, Mike Barry, obviously Jay's been on a few times, Evan Bulris. I'm probably forgetting some people who joined us, but it's been awesome. But now you're back, so it's just the two of us today.
A little stability.
Yeah, it's great. And we're jumping right back into it. We got a lot to talk. I wouldn't say a lot to talk about, but we have stuff to talk about. So we don't news. We usually hit the news first. We don't really have any news, except. They did another answering the burning questions. The AI probably answered them, but they did the one thing that was relevant is that they mentioned that they will be putting up new product pre-orders in November. That usually means it's usually about 6 to 8 weeks from when they post the pre-orders to when it's actually coming out. So they didn't say it was Legion specific, so it could be anything. I know MCP and Shatterpoint are in droughts now too, and X-Wing and Armada forever droughts pretty much, but hopefully some Legion stuff. I feel like Q1 they did say Geonosians, so they could be in January. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I hope that we get some sort of Legion specific ideas too, because it might give us a concept of what's going to be legal for Worlds.
Right. Yeah, I have a strong feeling that Geonosians are going to be legal for Worlds for sure, but I think Inquisitors is kind of
second one is the one I'm worried about.
That's the one where
just throw it out.
Yeah, I think Geonosians are going to be good, and it Separatists the CIS faction needs help.
We're craving something new.
Right, they need something new, not a battle force. So it's it'll be great to breathe some life into that faction because it's been a while since they've had anything truly Asajj is cool, but I feel wrong time for release for her.
Yeah, but we already have 2 Force users. I'm excited. Mm-hmm. It was probably 2 months ago when Rich O'Brien joined us, but I said that I was pretty excited to get a 3rd core option potentially, and this is a 3rd core option. So I'm pretty stoked to see what kind of new puzzle pieces we can unlock.
And it's it's so different than what they already have, which is great. So
it's not another just range 2 only white save.
Yep.
Wait, actually it is. Just thought that.
But so I mentioned that Mike's back with us at Fifth Trooper. We're part of the Fifth Trooper Network. So check us out on Patreon. Give us $1 a month, whatever you want. Join our Discord. Come hang out with us. Talk to us. Exciting times. But yeah. Events. A few upcoming events.
We've got PAX about a month and a week away.
The big one. Or I call it the big one. Yeah. SoCal Open's happening right now. Looks awesome. Wish I could be there. But up next is the next big World Qualifiers, PAX in Philly. Get hyped, everyone. And we are full. We're at a full 64. We have I think there's 6 or 7 on the wait list. Most people have messaged me personally, or it's somebody I talk to all the time. So they, as soon as people drop, I'll add people in off the wait list in the order in which they joined the game uplink. So If you want a better idea of when you would know if you're going to get to play, I don't have that, but I expect pretty much everybody who's on the wait list, like right now as I speak, will probably get to play, because people always
There's
change.
always
plans
7 drops the
change.
week of the day of.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know at least a few people are planning on coming no matter what, because it's PAX, or, they figure they'll get to play. So it'll be great. I'm very excited. I would love to start the day with 64 players on Saturday. But I don't have any other news about PAX. I started painting a new table today. I have to paint 2 more tables before we get there. But that's like, there was one point
for you.
I painted one table in like 3 days, and it wasn't even like a grind. It was like, I was just motivated, and like, I wasn't even off work. It was just like, that's what I did in my free time those 3 days completely. And like, I just painted a whole table, and it's a nice looking table too. So it'll get done. Speaking of, I'm hoping to have this table I started today. I put paint on it last week, like the primer, and I like actually started painting it at the desk today a little while ago. There's some pieces behind me if you like zoom in and squint if you're on the YouTube. But I'm headed up to Red Seal Gaming up in New Jersey. It's like northish New Jersey,
It's pretty far
central
north.
Yeah, it's not like New York north, but it's like North Jersey. I think it's firmly North Jersey. Red Seal Gaming, our very own Patreon subscriber Graham, Canadian Bear on the Discords, is hosting. It should be pretty sweet. It's October 28th. So if you listen to the cast when it comes out, it's this weekend coming up. Since it's Halloween, he's having a costume contest, which is awesome. I'm going to wear a costume. I'm very excited. Some really cool prizes for the costume contest. I was going to wear the costume no matter what, but then when I saw the prize, I was like, dang, do I need to go buy a really cool costume? Like, do I need to like upgrade this? But I'll also be debuting a new table there at this tournament. You won't see it before then. No one will.
Have I seen this one yet?
No,
okay.
It's not painted yet. No one. I haven't even seen it. I've conceptualized it in my mind. It's there. I know what it should look like.
Lay off the drugs, man.
Great. They're not drugs if they're legal.
No comment. No comment.
So that's coming up this weekend. There's like 11, like 12 or 13, I think, registered right now. We definitely want to get that to 16 players so that we can, because it's a store championship. We definitely. Oh, there's a smoke alarm going on upstairs in my house. That's great. Someone is cooking food. Hang on, I'm gonna mute.
Sure.
Never mind. It stopped. Did you hear it?
I did. Yeah.
The dude who lived in this house before us was like a hardcore firefighter, so he installed some serious smoke detectors in this house. Like, you open the oven door and they go off and then terrible. They all go off. Dude, it's awful. I expect it to happen at least one more time, so it'll be fun.
It wasn't that loud.
No, it only went off once, thankfully. Sometimes it goes off like 5 or 6 times. But so come on up to Red Seal Gaming Store Championship. I'm gonna play a fun Rebel list. I'm maybe Mandos. I think in general, like maybe I'll play Shadow Collective Mandos. I don't know. I really want to play Mandalorians.
What about like Din the Mandalorian?
Yes, we'll get there. That would have been a really good segue. Anyway, I have one more event to plug.
Damn it.
Yeah. I know you were. It was perfect.
I was ready for it.
But I like to do the events in order. We jump packs ahead. We always do. But the next one, 2 weeks later, November 11th, Top Deck Games is hosting their second store championship event. So we will be giving out an invite if we hit 16. If we somehow hit 32, we'll give out a second one because we have 2. We probably won't be doing like a 4th round for a cut because I kind of anticipate it not being necessary since so many people going already have invites. Like, I think of the 13 registered, like 8 people have invites. So it's just going to pass down. It's like, if there's a scenario where like the top 2 undefeateds are, we will like don't have an invite, we will do that 4th round. But if there's a scenario where like there's 3 undefeateds and we had like 20 players and like only one of them didn't have an invite, they're just going to get the invite and we're going to go home. Because like sense. Yeah, like I don't want to have to keep the staff there longer than and then closing. Though we did make it out of there only 5 minutes after closing last time.
We did pretty good last time, and there was like 32, 33 players. So I think we can do it again.
I got in the truck to pull out at 5 after 10, and they closed at 10. So I felt really good about that. And it's probably only going to be like 18, 20 players, I guess. But those are the events that we've been talking about. And yes, I'm probably going to bring Din to this event this weekend because Din is fun, even though he's not that great. Right, Mike?
I think he's a little subpar.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's ways that we can make him better.
Yep. Or probably points.
He does do. Probably points. And maybe a loadout keyword, but
I don't know. I don't know if that would. I guess it would help if you wanted to take the spear, I guess, and then you felt like you might want to flex to the Ambin rifle, like because it's cheaper. That's really the only thing I think, though, right? Like,
I think you could make an argument for flame projector versus prepared supplies.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess, too.
There's a couple like edge cases. I don't think that it would be like a be all end all fix for him, but it would be a nice little nice to have.
I played him on
There's every now and then that Cassian and Iden get good value out of it, but you don't see them using it every game.
No.
With the exception of the rifles.
Thursday night I played him, and I guess like I didn't use flamethrower. I was playing against a Kashyyyk battle force, so it was like he only had 3 model squads. Right. So it's like I didn't have an opportunity because Yoda and Chewie just dove on Din. I did get to double punch them with the Amban and the knife combo with his 2 pips, and that was fun. And I almost killed both of them because Yoda had like I shot it or something shot at Yoda, and Yoda took like 3 wounds. And then like he dove into Din, and then Chewie dove into Din. So I played the 2 pip, and Chewie died because Chewie had already taken like 4 wounds or 5 wounds, and Din got like 4 and pierced, so he got him. And then Yoda, I was like, if I kill Yoda here, like that's like the lottery, right? Yeah. But I did not kill Yoda, and then Yoda killed Din. So but not having the spear and like access to dodges for duelist hurts my feelings.
Yeah. But I guess before we get too far into the Din rabbit hole, should we kind of go over what we're going to talk about for the majority of the episode today?
Yeah. So go ahead.
You lead. As we get closer to the end of the year, but not exactly into like the Christmas holiday season, we're about 10 months on from the CRB releases and a lot of the quote unquote rulebook 2.0 changes. And we're also a full year as of Thursday from the IGs and Din releasing. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about the state of those 3 units, IG 8811 and Din, and then some of the actual practical changes about the CRB. And now that we've had about a year to digest, see them at different events, and then really just play with them and give terrain makers the chance to adjust tables to suit those rules. Like, how are they actually doing? And how are our opinions, and are they as overblown or dramatic changes as we thought they were? Are they pretty good? We can kind of talk about that. And after we finish that, we can kind of talk about what actually constitutes a competitive set of terrain these days. Because you could make a pretty valid case that that's changed a lot over the last year. Probably for the better.
Yep. All right. So what do we want to talk about first?
I think we could start with 88.
Okay.
This should be a pretty quick segment.
Yeah.
I mean, he's pretty, maybe not S tier meta, but he shows up in a lot of Empire lists that win. He's obviously a world champion.
Yep.
And I think he's going to have a lot of play going forward with the Inquisitors.
Okay.
I actually played a little test game with them earlier today with both the Inquisitors and 88. Just, some proxies. 3D printing is a thing.
I'm not. No, that wasn't it. 3D printing or anything. I'm just not looking. You're starting the meta too soon, man. Nah, you're trying to jump the shark here.
I don't think those guys are the meta, but I think they'll be a decent, or that combination of 3. But they'll be a decent dark horse. Unlike Boba Fett, there's no command card overlap. You basically just need IG's 1 pip and then maybe the 2 pip, and that one's even.
The 2 pip gives him which one's the one that gives him the aim every turn?
That's also the 2 pip. He's got a 1 and 2 2s.
Okay.
But you can get away with just the 1 pip and then running 5 That's Inquisitors.
Fair. Yeah.
And that one worked out pretty nicely. I think you'll actually see that on Tabletop Laboratories very soon. It's a cool YouTube channel from a buddy of ours.
Yep.
But I think 88's really good as it is. He's got Pierce, he's got Sharpshooter, he's got the ability to turn off green tokens. And those are all things that Republic Jedi, which are quickly becoming vogue, don't like. Anakin that can't spend green tokens is a really sad Anakin. It gets pretty
Yeah.
squishy.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, Gemso is so good. Like, just like, I might take a wound, but you're definitely taking a wound. And like being able to turn that off is pretty good. I've always felt that like IG-88 plays a lot like Bosk, except IG-88 to get his full value needs to get to range 3 eventually. But like at range, like with the red save and armor 1, it's like he can be pretty tanky unless there's, and he has impervious too, doesn't he?
He does.
Yeah. So it's like he can be quite tanky. And he's like a lot less prone to just being blown off the table due to like a positioning mistake like Bosk is. Though Bosk is like super lethal at range 4. So he can get away with a little bit more there in that range band.
Yeah, he's kind of like if Bosk went out on a date with a short trooper captain, like IG-88's the result.
Yeah, okay.
But
I think I'd hear that, but all right.
It's too many Angry Orchards, I guess. I don't know. No, but I think he's still going to be pretty stable in the meta going forward. He's going to be pretty weak to some of the Wookiee battle forces, though, because the armor does trigger impact. He still doesn't love Pierce, even with impervious. He's only 5 wounds, and he can't really hide.
Surge.
Yeah, he can't really hide from the Fluttercraft. So if the Wookiee battle force takes over, I think he'll probably go away for a little bit, but otherwise he'll be around in the meta for a while.
Bounty hunters are cool, right? It's like
They
rule of cool. People have always wanted to play bounty hunters since like they were first introduced into the game with Boba Fett and then Bosk, and like double bounty. It's just he's a tool. He's a tool for that. And 88's like a fan favorite. He's been around he's like is a droid hanging out there as like a bounty hunter in the movie. Like we didn't get a lot of context until like later on with the comics and expanded universe and stuff. 88's just cool.
Yeah, and at 110 points, he's super affordable.
He doesn't need any upgrades. Like
right, you can get away with like literally just recon intel.
Yep, that's usually
get him closer to that range 3.
There's upgrades that are definitely good, but he doesn't need them, and that's usually like that's a sign of a well-designed unit, in my opinion. Like he's a very well-designed unit. They did a great job with IG-88.
I think they did a pretty similar job with IG-11, but he's held back a little bit.
He's just not played. Like he's just never played. Like, and I'll be honest, like I think I played him maybe one time. Like he's got a lot of cool things. Like Gunslinger, super neat. Like especially because he can do it at range 4. Like range 4 Gunslinger's cool, and then because range 3 is when he gets his Pierce, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, and then right. Yeah, the programming really holds him back because he's a bounty hunter. He doesn't get a lot of orders. Rebels don't give out a lot of orders. Though I guess I'm talking it from the Rebel perspective because like
we could start there.
I'm not sure. Yeah. So it's like the operative slot is so important in the Rebel faction, and like he's never on my list of units that like I want to consider. Like he's pretty far down that list. Like, I mean, right now it's like competitively speaking, it's like Cassian, and he's a commander. But you're taking K2 with Cassian, like almost 99. I've never not taken him, and I think like 95% of the time, so you're going to take K2 with him. So it's like your one commander, your one operative is done. You have one of each left. So it's like it's really hard to get to IG-11 when there's like so many more interesting options ahead of him that like we know are very good, like Ahsoka. Formerly Sabine was very good. She's pretty mediocre now.
We haven't even touched on either Luke yet.
We haven't. It's like I mean, Chewie's a star, right? It's like if you don't have another plan for that operative slot, like if you're not planning to take like Ahsoka or operative Luke, like I think you just want to stick Chewie in there as a wound battery and Pierce at range 3, and he can line back. He can do a lot of things.
Yeah, he lets you not joust, but he lets you set up a little bit of a gunfight in the early going when you still have your critical when they've got their larger pools.
He doesn't have
to kind of tip the tide.
He doesn't have sharpshooter, but he almost always gets a wound because of that surge to crit and his Pierce. It's like and he's really good against armor. He's elite against armor. If the armor doesn't have cover, it's like he gets 2 wounds without aim, like almost every time, sometimes more. It's So it's like it's hard to even consider 11. I know like Evan, our buddy Evan Bulris, like messed around with him a little bit, and like I just like I just think he hasn't been played enough to really like have like an opinion. And we decided to talk about these units because these units released like exactly a year ago.
Yep.
Like exactly, which I thought was cool. I'm like, hey, let's talk about this because these guys came out a year ago.
Yeah, and you said that they haven't really been played, and I think that's a little bit of an indictment to a lot of just Rebel testing. He's probably been played, but he hasn't really shown up in major events. You know, the Legion group thing has kind of settled on the Cassie and Ahsoka as that, and obviously it's a very strong Rebel list. It's probably not the only list. We just haven't really taken the time to explore it. But we saw down at Crucible, Jarade did like a double speeder concept that was based around like R2 Operative Luke and full commandos. There's probably a double speeder list with like Han and IG-11, or even just R2 and IG-11, because if you can mitigate the movement with the AI aim or attack, and all you're doing is aiming shooting because you're shooting from the speeder base, you can get around some of the the liabilities, because arguably that AI is the only thing that holds 11 back.
I agree with that.
Right. I mean, he gets the extra pierce or he gets the suppressive, and you just can't take the nanny programming over him, I don't think.
Because that implies you're taking Grogu, or is the nanny programming free?
Let me double check for you.
I think it might be free.
I don't think you have to take Grogu for nanny programming.
No, you don't, but I think it is. I believe it's free. So if you're not taking bounty programming,
it is free, but you still get an AI. It's just dodge move.
Yeah,
which seems not great.
Right.
Because you still have the move aspect.
AI stinks.
AI stinks and you can't get consistent orders.
Yep.
And I think that goes for both Rebels and Empire.
I played a list when he first came out. Now that I think about it, with him and Lando, because you're right, against you.
Yeah,
we played on the remember playing. Yep, we were playing in my basement. Yep, I remember that.
Yeah,
and I remember like using Ace to give him an order. I think, and I'm like, this is really cool, but it's not really that. It's like, I guess that's cool, but like,
arguably the problem is that his command cards. You also have to take the self-destruct one. It's mandatory.
Yes.
So in a faction, both Rebels and Empire that has a lot of killer 3 pips, that one's not.
Fun fact: you can contingency out of it with Lando though. So
and now you spend over 200 points, and you haven't even gotten to the rest of your army.
Yeah, but you have Lando's range 3 pierce with sharpshooter 2. He's great. Lando's he's fine. He's cool. He's fun. Oh man, maybe I'll bring Lando this weekend. Jesus, I want to bring. I'm bringing Rebels. I know that. I'm bringing Rebels now. I don't know.
Just bring 11 end in.
Yeah,
just double down.
Yeah, and I never played his donut card, like the shoot everybody. I guess it's now range 1 to 2, so it's not like silly, but I don't know, so many things. Maybe I'll play IG-11 this week. Yeah, sounds good. And then now we come to the star of the show, with the man with the shiniest armor, Din Djarin, who he's got a special place in my heart. He's a fun unit. Command cards are simple, like very simple to understand. He's just fun. He's just like way too expensive. Like,
yes, like way too expensive.
You got to take the jetpack, right? You got to take a couple trainings. You got to take a weapon, either the spear or the Amban. And you really want to take the flamethrower to take advantage of Arsenal too. But then he's like almost as much as Commander Luke. It's crazy.
Yeah, if you're just talking Amban, jetpack, and flame projector, you're at 138, which is just too much. And that's really Din's only problem, I think, is that he just costs too much in a faction that needs to spend 110 in an operative slot, unless you're taking a Jedi like Ahsoka.
Yep.
But it's the same issue that Sabine has. They just need that 15 points less, and then they're fine. You can actually make plays with Din right now. You can slot him into the Ahsoka slot in the Cassian lists. And the effectiveness goes down as you lose force.
It saves you a few
command
points.
cards, but you get the extra points, you get another heavy. You can make a valid like store championship level run with that. You're just probably not going to dodge enough matchups to go 5-0 at a major tournament.
Right.
So, your mileage may vary there. I mentioned the Arsenal thing earlier. I'm sorry, the loadout thing earlier. I think that becomes a lot better for him if they reduce the points on like the jetpack. You know, because at 15, though, I guess at that point it's still more mandatory. Never mind.
Yeah,
It'd be
it's
15 because you have to take the jetpack, but if you
he's
make
yeah,
it
he's just
smaller,
so expensive.
maybe you can justify it.
Yeah, he's just so expensive. And it's like I like thematically like the jetpack is an attachment and it's not just part of him. Cause like he didn't have it in the first, the first 8-9 episodes of the show, right? I don't remember if it was 8 or 10 episode show.
It was a while. It was like half the season.
Yeah, he didn't get it. But like once you put it on him, he's 120 points. It's like, and it takes up. It's cool. He has 2 gear slots, but like they're generally taken by the jetpack and the flamethrower immediately. It'd be cool if he could like have a little more flexibility with it. Like I don't know, like giving him like a third gear slot and like making the jetpack like 5 points instead. I think like probably goes a whole long way to making him a lot more interesting and seeing like tables more often.
Yeah, Din at 110 base is a lot better than 120 base, including the jetpack.
And like in a vacuum, I don't love that the spear is 5 more points than the Ambin rifle, because like I think the Ambin rifle in some scenarios is like amazing, and the spear is good all the time. It's very straightforward. It gives you duelist and a pretty good melee beat stick. But the Ambin rifle in a situation where like, oh, Anakin's right there and he has 1 wound left. Let me just take care of that, and he can't gemso me. Like, that's really strong.
It's a thing that works. It can't be boiled away. It can't be mediced away.
Yeah. Yep.
If it kills him.
Right.
Yep. Do you think there's list options that haven't really been explored with Din enough yet? Because he's been on the shelf for a while for a lot of players. Like we haven't really seen a lot of Din on the table.
Right. I played him this week. But it's like he definitely feels like a unit that wants to be paired with like another operative that is similarly like decent, but he's too expensive for that. Like you would love to pair him with Ahsoka, but like that's like 380 points, give or take. And then, what else are you bringing? Like it really like hampers what you can take with the rest of the list when you're taking all these characters that cost a lot. Like,
yeah, they're about 350 together. Yeah.
But the good thing about Din is like you're not necessarily worried about like who he synergizes with, like which other characters, what other units. It's just like he kind of does his own thing. Like especially like, and you almost always want to take that comms relay on him, because like you're going to want to use it at least once so that you take advantage of him having his own aim and his own dodge for free, giving the order something else.
That's arguably one of his issues too, is that his command cards are very selfish. And a lot of the in vogue units in Legion at the moment have non-selfish command cards.
Right.
Ahsoka does a lot for the other part of the army. Cassian does. Boba does now, which sounds very weird.
There's a lot of value in like command cards for operatives that deal orders out to additional units. That because that was not something that like when the game originally came out in its design, the design space, they didn't do that. Chewie was the exception because his command cards were paired to a character, but it was very specific. Chewie?
Yeah.
What?
I said he has command cards?
I mean, when he's played with Han, that 3-pip is really good because you can do Han tricks twice.
This is true.
Which is great because Han tricks are a lot of fun. But yeah, it's like and Whistling Birds can be a dud just because like sometimes it's like an army that doesn't like. I had Whistling Birds in my hand when I was playing against Kashyyyk defenders, but it's like it's not really a great like play there.
It doesn't do anything.
It doesn't like do anything.
It won't even kill a model.
Right. Yeah, it won't. Yeah. So I don't know.
I think Din could potentially use a little rework of some of the command cards. We've already seen it with Anakin that they've kind of retrofitted some of the command cards to give extra orders.
I don't think it fits his character though. Like thematically, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't think so either, but I think it might be necessary to really make him playable if they're determined to not
unless points. I mean, when we get Grief Cargo one day, I hope they have a teamwork card. That's all. I want like him to have a teamwork card with Grief Cargo. He should have had a teamwork card with IG-11. Missed opportunity.
That would be cool. I don't know who Grief Cargo is though, so I'll take your word for it.
Carl Weathers.
Oh, Okay.
Apollo Creed. What?
I know who
Oh,
that is. I
man.
just didn't know that was his name.
Okay. Okay.
Whatever.
All right. Well, yeah.
Long story
Uh,
short, cut his points.
IG-88 good.
Great.
IG-11 who knows. Din help. Right? Help.
Yeah.
Just help. Help. All right. CRB. We're like almost a full competitive season in with the new rules.
Mhm.
There was a lot of jumping off the balconies and like
Wailing and gnashing of teeth.
yeah. And how are we feeling about it now? I'm pretty much okay with everything except deflect. Make deflect great again.
Yes, I think that's been beat to
Hey,
death worse than
deflect.
somebody with deflect in melee.
I probably say it every cast.
I'm not kidding. Yeah,
Yeah,
deflect is bad. That's fine. We've all accepted that as fact. But I think for the
it's
most
never
part,
over. I refuse to give up. Block is better than deflect. It doesn't make any sense.
yeah, I don't get
It
it.
doesn't make any sense.
It's kind of like throwing Craig Kimbrell again. It's just like asking for disaster. I don't know.
Oh man, if they put Kimbrel in tomorrow, I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, Philly's deep cut. But I think for the most part, the rules are fine.
Yeah.
And I guess the three big sections of rule change that have really come up have been cover, movement, and terrain rules and definitions.
I can count. Yes.
Yeah.
That is 3. I agree with that.
Yeah. There's still some really weird edge cases. It feels a little gamey at times. Cover feels very simplified and basic.
Boring.
Yeah.
It's boring.
But it's pretty clean for the most part.
It's pretty easy to understand. It's just underwhelming when you get there.
Yes.
Right. It's like
do you want to just start with cover?
Sure.
I still think the rule is boring. I think it's basic. It took away some of the skill of positioning. But it's super easy to do. I do think the vehicle silhouettes still need work. We've just gotten lucky that armor has not really been in the meta.
Well, the armor that is really good and exists is a trooper base. So
this is true. I mean the ATST giving full line of sight blocking is still very dumb. I think
yeah, that's bad. That's silly. It doesn't make any sense.
We're just lucky that the best version of Ewoks has Chewie on foot, so that we haven't really exposed that.
Yeah.
Because you can't fit the 14 activations behind the ATST. You can just fit 12, and that's not enough apparently. But it is what it is. I think that a lot of the hype for the demise of the cover system was overblown. But I think there's still a lot of grains of truth that we've seen shake out. Heavy cover is super prevalent, and it's almost impossible to accidentally cohere yourself out of cover anymore. You have to actively try to not get blocked by a piece of terrain. But I think we'll talk about that a little bit in the competitive terrain building segment. But it is what it is. It's fine.
Yep. Yeah, it's very easy to teach.
It is.
It's very easy to teach. So I appreciate that. It like oftentimes we just like look at like you're playing and you're like, you look at this and you're like, well, they might have cover. Where before you would be like, they might have cover. Let's check.
Right.
But now you're like, they might have cover. They have cover. Well, let's move on. Like, let's go to the next step. Let's roll dice.
It definitely sped up a lot of the judge call processes, right. which is great.
Yeah.
I like that part.
Yep.
Movement. This is my big one. I know I was pretty anti-rule change for this at the beginning.
Which part?
I hate jump for everybody.
Okay.
I think it devalues side-to-side lateral movement skill.
I think it's great. I think I'm on the other side, but
oh no, that's where I started.
Yeah.
It shifted a little bit.
Yeah. So
go through your spot.
Yeah, sure. So like I looked at it the first time when we first saw it, like I looked at it like I'm gonna see people on top of the cool pieces of terrain I built. Where like Legion was almost always played like on the ground. Like people didn't usually go on top of buildings unless like they started on top of a building. That was usually like if there was like a big building in that like started in a deployment zone, you'd see units on top of buildings and stuff like that usually. But like climbing was scary because of the dice, that you got to roll dice. You might lose your whole thing,
your whole unit.
Right. It's like, but you see strike teams on top of, like on like in Ewok forts up top, and like, you got people on these big rock, uh structures. I'm having trouble with words today. But yeah, I think cover is, or I'm sorry,
Movement.
I think movement was greatly improved by that. It watered down jump a bit. Like it definitely watered it down. They still get to do it at, their speed. If they're a Mandalorian, it's speed 3. If they're a Jedi, it's usually speed 2. But it killed scale, and that's where like they just like cut a keyword at its knees. Scale is now just not even an interesting keyword. Like people ask what it does, and I'm like, you just have expert climber and unhindered, so you can climb height 2 things, which is cool, but like you can also just pay 2 points for that,
right?
And unhindered is okay. It's very good on characters that like have relentless or steady, obviously. Right. But and then like I think the best change, and like this is not related to climbing, you don't have to like train track units on the movement tools anymore, and people never did that anyway. I'm playing a game like like it doesn't like here's the building, and like my rebel trooper can't touch the building, like it's like the wall is lava. I don't know, but it's like it makes sense that they'd like scoot around the building, like and be able to go to the other side, and I like that, like you can go off the table and go around things, like if there's a building, and like if you can make it to the other side, you get the other side. It's great. That was definitely a positive change 100% of the way. The climbing, I understand the reservations that some people had or still have.
Yeah, I've come around on it quite a bit. I definitely appreciate the fact that it is much easier. I'll still stand by some of my original points that it cheapens a lot of positioning side to side. And it makes me wish that we used the tape measure format for movement, honestly, because a lot of the movement changes, like you just mentioned, like scooting around the building or moving off the side of the board, a lot of it just deals with start and finish. So if we just set an exact range of like 6 inches or whatever we wanted to do, I think it would just continue down that path. So if and when we see like a 2.0 update, if this is the style of movement that they like, if it's continuing to go this way, if players like it, I would like to see movement shift a little bit more towards just a set, like essentially a donut.
They use Spec Ops uses a tape measure,
which
is interesting. Yes,
okay.
It uses tape measure for movement, or maybe it's range. Maybe it's only for range it uses a tape measure. Actually, I think it's range.
Yeah, I guess
movement's still.
I'll make it easier if you just want to give us a range stick, and the range stick is the
right.
Like I think that would be fine. If they're married to their template concept, then we can use
that. Though that like for range though, I love that like a speed 2 move is less than 6 inches. It's barely less than 6 inches, but it is.
Yes,
that's a super important.
I'm sorry. I was using it as an example. Like just give me a stick, and this stick is the movement. Because obviously a speed 3 wouldn't work on like 3 range. You would need a different size tool. But if you want to do something that way, if they're married to the templates, I think that would be great. But I think overall the rules are good.
It would also be a way, There's a lot of things. I do kind of like the rules right now. So it's fine.
Yeah, I don't mind it. It did help gun lines quite a bit because you can just kite easier, and I'm a gun line player, so that part is good. But I definitely overblew that one. I will fully admit that. It's not as bad as I thought it would be, despite the fact that it's not my favorite.
You aren't the only one.
Yeah, I'm just admitting.
Yep.
Let's see. I will say terrain rules and definitions are glorious. I think that solves so many issues ahead of time. I'm really glad that they changed the definition for impassable. Because I think that was a source of concern when you were teaching a new player in the past. It was like, oh, hey, I can climb this thing that's impassable. Well, but you can't walk past it. How can you climb it? And it just
Yeah.
in terms of grammar didn't make any sense.
Right.
And now that they've clarified that, I think that one's just been a net win since the start.
Sure.
Um, area terrain is still obviously the same. Like nothing really changed there other than the way that they split the definitions of buildings. And I think that was a good clarification.
Obstacle.
Yes.
Obstacle terrain.
I'll admit I still don't know what all of the definitions are or mean, but I know how to implement it on a table.
That's a judge's job.
Yeah, I'm not a judge anymore. Fuck that. You want to talk about how we set up terrain from a competitive standpoint then based on all of these in effect?
Sure.
Yeah.
I do what I want.
Yeah, that is true. I guess the first thing that I do want to ask is, now that we've seen much more climbing and ease of access and jump, and we're seeing jump 2 on like Asajj and Ahsoka, have we seen more height 2 and 3 buildings? Are we seeing more on tables?
No, but like I definitely want to implement them more in my I was at Top Deck the other day and I was talking to Colin, and he was like, we were talking about how excited we both are for Geonosians, and like height jump 3 is now a thing because Sunfac has jump 3. And he's like, oh, you got to make a new Geonosis table with height 3. And I was like, maybe. You never know. But yeah, I mean, like, it's now a thing. I do have something to say though about height 3 now that like it's relevant, because it wasn't really relevant before. It's usually like height 2 and then infinite, right? It's like that's usually where you went. But now we have units that can interact with, height 3. The airspeeder needs to be errated to jump to speeder 3. 100%. Yes, there's no way a little bug man with butterfly wings can fly higher than an airspeeder. I'm just saying. That's it. All right. I won't side tangent over.
No, that's fair. I actually don't think we'll see a lot of height 3 buildings, to be honest with you, just because that's really hard to transport.
Yeah, it's got to be.
You start to get into the physical realm of like, this is too difficult to put onto a table if you're going to have like how are you getting these places?
So like if it's 3D printed, like the designers are generally very good about it being like, like you can take it apart,
right?
Multi levels, but it's still like a very large piece of terrain you have to transport. It still takes up the space. It's just, I'm excited for the challenge in the future, but nothing crazy coming up for me before PAX, so to speak. But for me, how I'm designing tables, I'm just trying to design them with a little bit less, just in general, not less of one type, less. Because it's very easy to just take a lot of the scatter off the table and it's just works better for the rules, but it's less interesting. The scatter is really what in my opinion, that really brings the table to life. It's usually the really cool big pieces that you see. That's you see the ion cannon on Hoth, or that big weird trade tower on Mos Eisley, something like that. Those are the really cool feature pieces, or a lat in the middle of the table. And then the scatter is what kind of
that's what gives it its theme, its flavor.
Right. It fills it in real nice. So you don't want to get rid of all the scatter, but you don't want to get rid of the solid obstacle buildings, because there, you need positions to hide behind if you need to. You need things.
You have to hide from the fire sports.
Right. My poor white saves. But it's I'm trying to design them with a little bit less in mind. So
you mentioned a couple of different types there. Obviously the main types of terrain that you put on the table are obstacle terrain, like buildings, area terrain, and then scatter.
Yep.
In the past, for the first 4 years of the game, you would say that most terrain was obstacle. Then we had a lot of scatter, and there's a couple pieces of area terrain. Do you think that still holds true? Have you seen some of the scatter drop lower than the area?
I mean, not personally, because it's usually my tables I'm playing on, and they haven't been I haven't updated many of them since the CRB. I have a few new ones, but I haven't updated a lot of the old ones to account for that. It's a little bit easy for me because my tables are usually denser. I can just take a few pieces off, and I usually like to have at least a handful of pieces of area terrain. I know that it's always something that's harder to implement, and people always want more of it. It's always it's a struggle. I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
On the concept of area terrain with its implementing, while it can be tough to build, where do you like to put it on the table when you're setting up for a major? Like when you're getting set up for packs and you're putting your area terrain out, do you find that that works best for balance when it's in the center of the table as the piece? Do you like to put it off to the corners? Do you like it kind of in the diagonals for it, like coming off the intercept points?
I like them where I know they're probably going to be impactful and useful and used. So, and that's kind of like, so not in a specific area, because usually I'm like around 4 pieces of area terrain on a table, which is like not as
That's my
much as
next
some
question.
people would like. I'm usually like 4, maybe 6. Like some of them I have a lot more, some of them I have a lot less, but I like to put them like towards the center because usually that's where they will be like relevant, or at least could be. Uh, I try not. I sometimes I will put them as like a center, like KP type thing. That makes a lot of sense because like it's providing cover, but you can shoot through it, which is great. You don't want like a giant big line of sight blocker in the center usually, because it's all if it's in the center, it also makes things like recover and hostage like sometimes impossible to deal with. So, uh, but I don't really have like a set rule. It's usually like, but you'll if you like go like if you go to one of my events, like you'll see patterns. You'll see things that like every person who puts a table together, like they're usually like it's usually each table is going to feel a little similar, a little you're like obviously I'm trying
There's
not to make
formats.
them right. Yeah, it basically like obviously it's not like I'm not trying to make them like symmetrical and all the same, but like I want them to all be fair. So it's hard to like not make them it's hard to make them all different like a layout completely different if it's you're setting up all the tables. So
Mhm.
it's also good to have somebody else come around and like look at them before the event, somebody else who has the experience and like change things. Like I did that for Jordan at Crucible and I think the tables were great. So he set them up and I like rejiggered things here and there. But
I know when we're talking about like area placements, I'm a big fan of putting them not as the centerpiece. You have a lot of like just shorter than a silhouette crate pieces that work nicely as the center. Those are
yep.
my favorite things because they're not really coverable because you can't sit on top of them, but they're also like a physical piece. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you put big area pieces in the center, it gets difficult to do KP
Yep.
because it can really push things way out to the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to kind of put the area if you're picturing like 5 to 6 o'clock and then 11 to 12, kind of if you're coming in from like that major offensive section, so that it comes into play while you're there, but it doesn't really block you out
Yep.
of the center. You can't just play peekaboo and hide around it. And then I also like to just stack the area in the main deployment zones. Because I think when you're talking about like disarray or advanced positions, it's nice to not have that tiny or that giant building back in the corner of your deployment zone
Right.
that blocks it out. You know, it gives you some flexibility
Yep.
about which angles and routes you want to go.
Yeah, I agree with that.
How much
Some
area is too much area though?
I don't know that I don't know that there is too much as long as you have enough obstacle terrain and line of sight blockers that there's like sometimes like there's like occasionally there's a table that has like just it's almost all area terrain and by
Mhm.
definition area terrain is not line of sight blocking even if like you could hide a silhouette behind a piece of it like and occasionally you'll make a piece of area terrain where like you can hide a silhouette behind something but you need to make sure your opponent that everyone is clear that this is area terrain so it is not line of sight blocking under any circumstances. However, occasionally you see tables and they're usually tables with trees because trees are very like that's kind of like area terrain, smaller trees like palm
Yeah,
trees, smaller deciduous type trees, little pine trees and stuff like that. That's really like what people love to make into area
that's
terrain.
bread and butter area terrain.
Right.
Yeah,
Scarif, like my Scarif table that's the one that has the most area terrain on it. Like I think I have like 5 or 6, I think I have like 6 pieces and they're all like pretty decent size. Like you can very easily hide like 2 or 3 units of troopers like in them, like behind them and in them. So I think it's a really good table. But then you see some where like they just have way too much. Like this is like, and sometimes table design gets you get into like the you get into like you have to find the balance of like theme and playability and fun. And like there is a balance between all of those. And sometimes like it's very easy for a lot of people, especially like if you haven't like played the game a lot, or you're more of a hobbyist, to like your table's going to lean way more thematic and like thematic than it will playable and fun. So, and that can kind of be a problem, I think, because I see a lot of tables that like, this is the Battle of Hoth, and there's like 5 pieces of terrain on this table, and it's like, it looks great.
But
It
Nick,
looks
there's a trench
great.
system that
It
covers the
looks
entire thing
great. But like, where are you hiding anything?
off the
So
table when they're shot.
yeah.
Speaking of, you made a comment earlier, hostage and recover. Big buildings in the middle. Should they be there? And is there an exception?
So there's an exception, and it's if it has like multiple like ramps or staircases, and you got to make sure that it's big enough that like that center point is not gonna like be hanging on an edge or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not gonna accidentally, because like also in the middle of a tournament, like terrain gets bumped all the time. So like you got to make sure it's not like small enough that like if it gets bumped like half an inch at one point, that now it's not playable for the next table. Because sometimes that can happen. So like it's got to be something big. It's got to be something that like you can access without like, because otherwise if you have like an army of like Mandos and you're playing like recover the supplies, like they're gonna have a really good chance of just running away with the game because they have jump and you don't.
So does the climbing rule impact at all? Because I've seen a number of tables recently, because I know the center point being a larger building was a pretty big no-no for a long time for that reason. Because you just sometimes auto lost because you couldn't get to the top and somebody could jump. What about like having platforms that are there that if you picture height 1 is 6 inches, they're like 5 inches tall so that everybody can climb up to it?
Right.
Do you think that works? Because we saw some of those situations at Nova.
I think that can work, but I think just in general, having like a big line of sight blocking building in the center, it can, in a competitive setting, like between 2 very competitive players of like a high skill level, like that's just going to be a game that's not interesting sometimes. Like they're just going to like no one's going to engage until the end of the game. And they're just going to like, whatever their objective is, if it's KP, it's like they're all just going to wait until the end of the game, and then they might engage, but like they might not.
Mm-hmm.
And it just becomes a very boring game. So I think that like not putting terrain in the center of the table still holds true, and it's not like their line of sight block terrain. Like you just shouldn't do it, even if it's your center piece and like it's supposed to be in the center, like like it probably
like a giant
shouldn't be there.
pyramid temple. I don't know.
Yeah, like I mean, I did it before too. Before I was running like real tournaments, like I used to like do weird like stuff like that too. And it's like you learn from it, and you realize that it's gonna like cause headaches, and it's better for it not to be in the center table. So they're still gonna see it. It's still gonna be part of the game, but it shouldn't be in the center.
The only thing worse than a large building in the center is a wall in the center, because that just says if you don't have a force user, you lose the game.
I mean, we've talked about our game at Nova before COVID, where the centerpiece of terrain was that building, and like there happened to be walls blocking my doorway that weren't supposed to be there, but they were. So play it as it lies.
Yeah.
And it like that's a prime example of why a piece of terrain like that should not be in the center of the table. Because like you had Luke and Sabine, and I did not have those units.
Yep.
So I did not win that game. But I probably didn't win that game for a lot of reasons, but that's one of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even with the new climb rules, like that still doesn't make too much of a difference there.
Yeah.
Because you're still going to be 2 inches faster on, every single move.
And like, yeah, it's like, yep.
How big is too big for a line of sight blocker though? Like you probably don't want something larger than like 4 or 5 inches from side to side, right?
Yeah, and it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for me because like I like really cool pieces, and like the really cool pieces tend to be really big. I think if you have to like, I think it generally speaking, if like you have to like, if you're on one end and you like double move to the other end and you're still like not on the other side, like, or you're not like clear of the building, that's probably too big. But it depends on the piece. Like if it's like a big building and then it has like a small building on top, it plays a little differently, so it can work. I don't think there is I think that as long as you can when you're making this table, you're making your terrain pieces. I think that you need to keep design in mind, as long as you don't have too many of them. Like you can have one really big thing, but you can't have like 4 really big things.
Right.
It doesn't really work anymore. There's just too much like large terrain, and it can make the game uninteractive.
Yeah, an example of a game that we'll probably briefly mention in the next segment. You have a Korriban table, and it's got a giant pyramid, and there's a number of tables out there that have that concept. You've got the ion cannon, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's where you talk about putting the tables in from the blue player perspective, the bottom left and then the top right hand corner.
Yep.
They don't occupy most of the deployment zones. There's things like Long March and Danger Close that still impacted disarray, but they're not the standard ones. Yep. And if you're gonna take a large piece of terrain and you're married to it and you definitely want it on your competitive table, stick them in those corners.
For sure.
And you can still have the view. It's still going to come into play for some deployments, but it doesn't dominate the game.
Agreed. Yeah, that's something I learned pretty quickly. Like I think even before I did the first ACO was that like keeping those pieces like outside of the major offensive deployment zones, like up in the corners, is better. Like yep.
I think that basically wraps up like what makes a competitive table, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Don't block the middle with giant buildings, keep them in the top corners, put some area on it, pull back some of the scatter so that you're not in permanent cover.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about very briefly about
just like a fun terrain discussion? That was a lot of fun.
It was.
All right. Yes. Worlds.
Yeah. So we played a couple test games, just to kind of get some reps.
Ooh.
And I haven't actually played against your Cassian Ahsoka list until that game.
Yeah, I didn't play a lot before Nova. Like I played like versions of it before. Yeah. So yeah, we played. I played basically my Nova. I think it was my Nova list. I didn't even get the cards out. I didn't even get the cards out. I only got the command cards out in Battle Deck because I was like, I know how to play this list. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, Yoda is like, and I play against a lot of really good Yoda players too. Like, you know, I play against all kinds of Yoda players, but like I especially play against like you and, you know, Rich O'Brien I play against sometimes. Like I play against really good Yoda players, and like he's just like he can just do so much. It's so like you can't like, it's so hard to beat.
Yeah, we talked 2 weeks ago with Mike about the Yoda Padme list. So I know we ran through a couple different variations of it again this week in our 2 games. And man, it still doesn't feel like a great matchup going into the Cassian Ahsoka list. One of the things that you do very well is that you've got 5 range 5 plus shots between the snipers, DFDs, and Cassian, and it doesn't let Yoda really dictate the engagement.
Right.
And other than the vets, there's not really an easy target to get to without exposing your units. And then that still relies on you exposing the vets. I still think it's an okay matchup. We ended up playing 2 games, and weirdly enough, I lost on key positions, but won on breakthrough. Which
and the breakthrough game was wild. That breakthrough game was wild.
Yeah, I tried to throw it away to you, and you
did try.
I did.
I'm like, it was major offensive, and like the table kind of like, I went this way and he went that way. We like toilet bowled, and it was like, you know, but
I got bored and threw an arc trooper.
Yeah, he got bored and threw an arc trooper at me, and like I didn't even kill it, but like I was able to like, you know, kill something else. And I played my snipers really poorly, and that's generally like that's a weak point in my game, is like I don't play strike teams. I play them probably too aggressively or too casually. Like I don't value them as much as I should. Like they're an activation. I need to value them as much as the next one. Like, because one of the strengths of the list is that I have 10 activations.
Right.
And they almost all get to shoot. So, but yeah, I lost a strike team early in that game because like I didn't have enough room behind the line of sight blocker and like to hide everything completely. And like I didn't leave enough room for the strike team to like, you know, completely hide, and you were able to see both models and kill them. So that was that.
I'd be willing to go out on a limb and say that the Cassian Ahsoka / Cassian Luke build is the second worst matchup for the Yoda list. I still think like double Dark Gav is probably worse, just because you're relying on rolling crits against something like that. There's just
It's
not
a bad
enough.
matchup for like everybody.
Yeah,
Unless...
there's just not enough. I don't think there's enough impact in the Yoda list. You just have to hope that your crits show up.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10 they do, because you have 18 aim tokens, but you still need them to show up.
Yep.
But I do not think it's a very comfortable matchup, and I expect that we'll see a lot more of it because it handles a lot of things well.
Agreed.
I also had a chance to play Yoda Padme, or I played an Anakin Padme list against the Yoda Padme versions. And that was a pretty boring mirror, not gonna lie. Nothing really died until turn 4 when one of us got a little too aggressive.
Man. We both get to token castle. It's so boring.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's basically what it was. Luckily, it was
know.
intercept, so like one of us had to step forward.
Yeah,
so it kind of ended on 4.
You have to be really patient with those lists, with the the Yoda, the token battery list, like the Anakin list. You have to like be really like, you have to just be really patient. Like Yoda says, patience, or every Jedi says patience. They all say it.
I must admit, I'm actually leaning a little bit more towards taking Anakin Padme to the next tournament versus Yoda Padme. It's been getting a lot of like hype, the Yoda version, so I do expect people to lean a little bit heavier with some of the armor and the Dark Troopers, and I think the Anakin Padme list just shreds that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So if people over rotate to counter Yoda, I think the Anakin ones get better. And I don't have enough arcs for 501st, so I will not be doing that one.
I can help you with that.
You can, but I also like fucking hate flight stands, and all of my arcs are broken right now.
I know.
Literally, all of my arcs.
If I still had the resin printer, I could print you like the little smoke clouds that are like, they don't break as often. Though, like they still like because there's not like a specific contact point, and like you super glue them, they still like tend, but they're a lot easier to put back together, like way easier.
I have this is a tangent. I have a Boba Fett model that the flight stand broke, and I ended up just using his foot standing up on top of like a dead HK droid, like a
nice killer. Yeah.
So
that's great. Yeah.
I think I'm just gonna do that with my arcs and just have them walking over dead droids, because I'm not putting them back on the flight stands.
Yeah, the flight stands for like the Shatterpoint Mandalorians and stuff are really cool, because like it's all smoke. Well, it's all smoke clouds and stuff.
Oh, nice.
Hey, but, man, we can play Shatterpoint sometime.
Can, but we're not.
Okay. No,
we're not. But I think I'm gonna get some more reps with the Anakin Padme list. That one kind of impressed me with some of the like the quad SA dodging ones. That I think it'll do pretty well.
Yeah.
Is there anything like unexpected showing up that you've been seeing as you're kind of prepping?
No. If Worlds was tomorrow, I would be playing Ahsoka, Cassie, and K2. So I'm kind of just like, I need to like, I know it does well in a lot of matchups. Like it can do well against Blizzard. It can do well against, the clone lines and stuff. It's more for me right now. For me, it's more about like getting those quality reps in with that list and just like practicing with that. Because like we have no idea. Like maybe Genosians are like really, really good. Inquisitors are probably really, really good.
Yeah.
And if they're there, that's something we got to worry about. And like
can I laugh for a second about that?
Yes, you can.
In the game I played earlier today, I turned off 2 force barriers, a push, and a reflex in 2 turns.
You're rude.
It was
absurd. Man, they can't even get their free dodge. That's so
get their free dodge.
I didn't even think about that one. Yeah, it's not just force push, guys.
We were playing, and he was like, "I'm gonna tap." I was like, "Do you want to tap your reflexes?" He's like, "I'm not even sure, because I'm not even sure it's gonna work." I'm like, "Why wouldn't it work?" He's like, "Because you could stop it." I was like, "Oh yeah,
yeah, and it's not limited. You just keep doing it like every time, like." Oh no, you don't get to do it. It's like
I rolled up with IG and I threw like 4 crits, and I was like, "Do you want a barrier or a crit?" It was 2 crits and 4 hits, and I was like, "I'm gonna fish for crits," and he's like, "Why are you fishing for crits?" I was like, "Because you have barrier." He's like, "Dude, you have 2 Inquisitors. Do you think barrier is even gonna trigger?" And then it didn't.
It's like the Matumbo commercial where he's like, "Oh no, not today," except every time it's like, "Oh, not today."
It was pretty gross.
So bad. I hate it so much. I'm so sad.
I do think
you're ready for the new world, and I'm not.
Oh, I'm not ready for it. I'm just starting. Okay. I have to be ready. If that's the route that people start to go down, though, is that some more of like the double Inquisitor concepts and then more of the like the Yoda Padme. I do think we'll see more lists like Kentucky Dan's from Nova. The 6 Pike spam with Bosk actually deals pretty decent damage, and Bosk throws too many crits for Yoda to barrier. And he's gonna force saves and things are gonna die. And that list doesn't have a great way of dealing with a massive amount of suppression. There's Padme's 1 pip. You can pull them off that way. You've got a lot of courage 2 units with the arcs, but if you put down a concentrated amount of suppression, they are going to get slowed.
Yep.
So I think people are still sleeping on that. There's a belligerent amount of tokens with the Pike spam still, and going the direction of like Bosk instead of Maul might be okay because you don't have to cut anything.
Yep.
It's a gross 10x. Any final thoughts?
Is. Legion's fun. Play more
Birds.
Legion. Go Birds. Yeah, they're playing in like 2 hours. I'm excited. Phillies though, man. I don't know. Those first 2 games in Arizona, pretty disappointing. Though now they get to win at home.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. Aaron Nola's got a 0.96 in 3 starts this game.
Nola's been so good. Since we're paying everybody, they got to pay him now, right?
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone better on the market.
No, I mean, like,
so we can get into this later.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.